What's up guys, Travis from AmericanTrucks.com. Today I'm going to show you how to install one of the most popular mods that all people like to throw on their 2015 or 2016 F-150, especially if you have that 3.5 liter EcoBoost under the hood. A cold air intake like this one. This is the cold air intake, and it's currently one of the most affordable cold air intakes that features individual flow tubes for both sides of the motor. Anything that's going to cost less than this option is going to be a new intake that only has one tube with one filter. A lot of people really like the look of the double tubing going on here. It's very cool looking, has kind of a sporty feel to it. So if that's what you're going for, this is going to be the least expensive option. But why would you throw a cold air intake on your EcoBoost in the first place? Well, this motor does something pretty cool. It can actually adjust your air and fuel on the fly. Most motors can't actually do that. You actually have to custom tune them. But that really opens up the playing field for installing any mods like an intake, because when you throw a new intake on the EcoBoost motor, you get higher CFMs, higher airflow that is. The motor will actually calculate that on its own, and you'll pick up some more horsepower and torque. Even if you don't tune your truck. As far as what kind of performance you can get out of this intake, well, I would confidently say you'll gain at least high single digit and maybe even low double digit gains, especially for torque. These things do really feed off of torque, especially with new intakes. And that's really cool because when you're driving around, that's going to increase your throttle response. Overall, it's going to make the truck feel a lot sportier. That's pretty cool considering this intake only costs $200. So no tune required, one of the most affordable options. That's a buy in my book. Other thing that I really like about this intake is it just looks good, right? The factory intake system is considered a closed element design, which means that you have the factory air box sitting right here with the air filter inside, but it's tucked away. You can't actually see anything. And let's face it, the factory intake just doesn't look that good. That's why I'm a fan of open element designs like this one, because when you pop the hood, you got much nicer tubing under here. This is aluminum, by the way, with a really nice matte black powder coat finish on it. And of course, you can see the high flow filter as well. But when you close the hood here, you have this nice weather stripping. That's going to seal this up nicely so you're not getting any of that hot engine bay air feeding through the filter and into the intake system. So colder, denser air like a colder intake is supposed to do. The install for this intake is also incredibly simple. Shouldn't take you more than an hour, again, because there's no tuning required, and it's technically a bolt-on application. It fits directly onto the factory tubes that go to the turbos, and then the new heat shield actually clamps down on the bottom half of the factory air box. It's a pretty creative design, and again, it makes the install incredibly simple. So I'm going to go ahead and give this a soft 1 out of 3 wrenches on the old difficulty meter. If you want to make more power out of your truck, but you don't have that much experience turning wrenches, this is definitely a good place to start, again, because of how easy it is to get this done and because of how affordable this intake system is. And if you decide to opt for this one over any of the other options, come back in a little bit, and then I'm actually going to show you how to install this intake step by step. Okay guys, before we get started, you'll need a standard drive ratchet, and really all you need are a couple of sockets. You'll need a 7, an 8, and a 10mm socket. Those can be shallow, but the 10mm is going to need to be a deep socket. Now, obviously, to make things go a little bit quicker and easier, you'll probably want an extension, and an impact swivel socket with an impact gun is going to make it go even quicker. Okay, so first we have to remove our factory air box. We're going to be keeping the bottom of the air box because the new intake heat shield actually sits on top of it. So we're just going to depress these two tabs here. That's actually going to unseat the top of the air box, as you can see. Once you've done that, you also got to disconnect the temperature sensor here on the intake tube. For this, all you got to do is kind of just turn it a little bit. The little rubber grommet keeps it locked in. Pop it out like so. Okay, next we have to disconnect the clamps that secure the first half of our intake system to the tubes that connect to the turbos. So you have some band clamps on here. You'll need a 7mm socket to loosen these up. Okay, now you also have to loosen up the tube on the other side here. This clamp's kind of tucked down here in front of the engine cover, so I can't really show you exactly where it is. Let's go ahead and loosen both of those up. Then you can pull the entire intake as one piece. Okay, so we have our factory intake system removed. I threw them up on the table real quick. We have to do some work to our new intake before we actually throw it in the truck. But before I do that, I wanted to give you a quick comparison between the two, most notably the filters. That's really the big player in this game here. And obviously these factory paper elements don't do a good job. Our truck actually only has around 4,000 miles on it. You can see this thing's already pretty busted up here. The EcoBoost pulls a ton of air into the motor, and this just doesn't cut it. So new filter, way more high flow, a lot more volume and surface area, and this is actually washable and reusable. So you'll actually save a little bit of money in the long run. Surprisingly, these filters are not that cheap, especially if you get them at the dealership. This is a once and done deal, so that's really cool. So we can finally ditch our factory intake system. We have to install the weather stripping on our new heat shield here because this is an open element design. When the hood is down, the weather stripping should help insulate the filter a little bit better. Really important here. Let's go ahead and throw this on top. You're also going to need something to trim this up to length once you got it installed completely. Okay, next we're going to install this little intake support here, this little rubber grommet guy. Go ahead and seat him inside of this little tab right here. You want the rubber facing up towards the holes where the intake tube is going to come through. And then all you need to do is grab the little flat washer that's provided in the kit. They also provide a little nut here, so go ahead and get all that hardware on the bottom stud. You want to get this hand threaded on here first. Go ahead and get him seated all the way, and then you're going to drive him home using a 10mm socket. All right, now we have that rubber support here. Now we're gonna install the intake tube. You can see we have a little tab on the bottom of the tube here, so go ahead and get both of the tubes lined up with the holes on the heat shield, and then you're gonna use the same hardware that we just used on this little rubber support to secure the tubes as well. So again, this is a 10mm socket. You're probably gonna want an extension to come down in between the tubes so you can tighten this one down. All right guys, now comes kind of an annoying part here. You have to slide the air filter onto the tubes. Sounds really simple, but this thing actually has a really nice coat on it. They definitely did a good job, but unfortunately it's also extremely grippy because it's a matte finish. So a little bit of spray lubricant is going to make this a lot easier. All you need to do is just kind of spray down the ends of the tubes here a little bit. Maybe spray on the inside of these little rubber fittings here as well. This should make sliding this on a little bit easier. You also want to make sure you have your band clamps on here as well. You also want to make sure the fasteners are oriented in a way that you can easily access them with one of your sockets. All right, now to tighten down these clamps, you're actually going to need an 8mm socket, slightly larger than the 7mm for the factory clamps. Okay, we're almost ready to throw our intake in the truck. Now all we have to do is install the rubber couplers to adapt the tubes to the factory tubes for the turbos. So same deal, grab some lubricant, spray these down a little bit. Make sure you don't spray yourself in the face like I almost just did. And then make sure you also have the appropriate size clamps for both of these rubber couplers here. And again, to tighten this stuff down, you'll also need an 8mm socket. You don't need to get these things crazy tight. You just want to kind of get them on there enough that they're not going to move around. Because once we actually go to install this thing, we're probably going to have to move these around a little bit and get them sized up. All right, so once you got both of those in place, let's go ahead and throw it inside the truck. All right, now when you go to throw the intake in place, you want to make sure you have the other clamps on here on both of these rubber couplers. That way, once you get them seated, you can actually tighten everything down. So go ahead and make sure that the heat shield on this side, you have these little metal tongues on the heat shield. They're going to line up with some holes in the plastic bottom half of the factory heat shield. So as you're getting those lined up, also get both of these rubber couplers in place here at the same time. And this is probably where we're going to want to loosen some of these up as well. All right, so we got both of our intake tubes generally seated on the correct tubes for the factory part. Now we're going to get the air box clamp down here, and then we'll tighten down all of our clamps on the rubber couplers. Okay, things are looking good. Next, we're going to install our intake temperature sensor. There is a small hole on the side of this intake tube here. Just run your hand up along it. You just have to press the intake temperature sensor into the hole there. There should also be a rubber grommet already installed in the tube, provided in the kit. If it's not, make sure you press that in there first. All you gotta do is use gentle hand pressure, just kind of twist the sensor back and forth until you get it seated inside the rubber grommet all the way. All right, so once you got the tubes bolted in here, you got all your couplers seated, and you've got the temperature sensor back in place, now comes the fun part. You can turn the motor over, and that should wrap up the entire install. Again, no tune required. You should be hearing some good turbo noise coming out of the hood as well. And that'll also wrap up my review of the cold air intake fitting your 2015 or 2016 3.5-liter EcoBoost powered F-150. I'm Travis, thanks for watching, and for all things F-150, keep it right here at AmericanTrucks.com.